Right now, the weather's what I like to call stupid fucking cold, and Carl told us he saw some flurries earlier. Good thing I have my cup of hot cocoa with me as I type this. Homemade, none of that Swiss Miss shit, and some marshmallows, along with candy cane dust, and you've got yourself an ideal holiday beverage. Sometimes I like to add a splash of eggnog to mine for extra sweetness. Speaking of holidays, Christmas tends to be a pretty intimate event for a lot of people in town. Sure, there are still some work parties, but for the most part, it tends to consist of mainly small family and friend gatherings. My parents had gotten done with a pretty busy work week and were talking about who to invite over for Christmas. While they talked, I was in the living room watching Sesame Street. I know Alonzo and Donnell said they'd be coming over after closing. My mom told my dad. Who else do you think would be willing to come over? By the way, Alonzo and Donnell are the names of the Formagios, my now, I guess, former employers. What about Gerald? My dad suggested. He seems like an alright guy. Gerald was the owner of the mechanic shop in town. Alright, so that's 3 people, my mom counted. What about Chuck? I wouldn't bet on it. Work's usually too busy for him, but I could ask about it. Well, I'll put him down as maybe for now then. They continued talking about who else might want to come. In total, they came up with about 12 people. Considering we'd only been in town since November, it was impressive they already made that many friends in that amount of time. The other thing they had to do was holiday shopping. They did some for my toys while getting things for Thanksgiving. However, with people coming over, they would need more food and dinnerware. My mom was to do the shopping while my dad finished up some projects. She did offer to do the work instead, but he insisted. The town has a Walmart that people can shop in. Who the hell thought establishing one would be good? I have no clue. Actually, to be truthful, it does pretty well, and unlike other Walmarts, the employees actually get paid pretty well. From what I heard, their pay used to be shit until they unionized and threatened to burn the place down. Nothing like a little arson to get assholes in charge to bend the knee. My mom went in with me in the buggy and shopping list in her hand. Seeing how it was only a week till Christmas, the store was really packed. My mom was trying to decide which sides to get when the store trip turned into one of survival. Every so often, some new creature will show up in our town. It's rare, and usually we deal with them fine. However, sometimes there came ones that were harder to put down. This was such an instance. She heard what sounded like drumsticks being torn from a turkey coming from the other end of the aisle. Realizing what it might be, she grew nervous. The aisle she was on happened to have cookware, and she grabbed a knife for protection. She was able to work it out of the package without making too much noise. I feel I should mention at this point, my mom has a seething hatred for noisy shopping carts. Their squeaking is bad enough, but what added to her disdain for them is the fact that one nearly got us killed. It had been fine so far throughout the trip. She was planning on leaving it in the aisle. However, she needed to take me out of it and move it out of the way to get by. When she did push it, for some reason, it made an ear-scraping squeak. My mom cursed at it and then glanced in the direction where the first noise came from. To her horror, something now stood at the other end of the aisle. She described it as being tall, practically towering over the shelves when it was standing upright. Its body was covered in thick, dark fur that reminded my mom of steel wool. Its face was almost entirely covered save for some ape-like features, sharp teeth, and sickly white eyes. Despite this thing seemingly appearing to be blind, my mom said she could feel it staring at her. In its clawed hands was a torn-off arm and a man's half-crushed head whose one still visible eye was filled with terror. She took a step back and it took a step forward. She raised her knife, trying to intimidate it. However, it only gave her a look of amusement, as if she may have well been trying to threaten it with a breadstick instead. It drew in a deep breath and then let out a monstrous roar that caused glass to shatter. My mom screamed and jumped back, dropping the knife as jars of pasta sauce burst into shards. She remembers me bawling at this point, absolutely terrified by it. "Don't worry, Peter," she whispered while running with me in her arms. "I won't let it hurt you, I promise." The sounds had obviously attracted the attention of other patrons as well as the staff. It was relentless and mowed down whoever or whatever got in its way. My mom said she felt chills hearing people's heads pop like grapes. All the while, she could feel its breath on the back of her neck as if it was pursuing us. The store thankfully prepared for such instances as this. Several gunshots echoed throughout the store. The creature let out a cry of pain. Realizing it was no longer giving chase, my mom stopped and glanced back. It turned out we'd ended up in the grilling section of the store. Some employees, along with the manager, were rapidly firing at it with shotguns. My mom has said they had to have pumped at least 30 slugs into that thing in total. All the while, my ears were being covered to prevent hearing damage. It collapsed to the floor, and they thought that was the end of it. Then the employees and manager began stepping away, presumably to get some cleaning supplies. My mom is a perceptive woman. She stared at its body and detected something off. It seemed to be vibrating slightly. She chillingly realized that it was giggling. She tried to warn them, but it was too late. It sliced off the legs of one of the nearest employees, while the others screamed and cursed in horror. Then it proceeded to start doing the same thing to others. It had been toying with them the whole time. It practically laughed off each slug fired into it. My mom was quick to act. There happened to be some lighter fluid and a box of matches nearby. I was apparently sobbing in silence during all of this, no longer able to really bawl as I did before. She set me down and raised her index finger to her lips. There was only a single employee left alive in the area at this point who was about to be eaten. She quietly opened the fluid container and splashed its contents onto the monster. It turned in time to see her lighting a match and then flicking it onto it. Unlike the gunfire, this caused it genuine pain. It roared in agony and glanced at my mom before fleeing the section. Things quieted down after that. From what she heard, it got in through the back entrance. Apparently, someone in the morning shift didn't close it all the way after taking out the trash. My dad later found out about what happened and was, of course, extremely concerned. "Geez, and I thought shopping would be less stressful for you," he joked when we were back at home. My mom gave him a small laugh at that. Despite what she'd seen shaking her up pretty badly, that did bring a smile to her face. "Maybe you should do the shopping then," she jokingly told him. Although she wasn't being serious, he said that he would. My mom tried to protest. However, he told her she needed to relax. Eventually, she relented. A few days later, he went and did all the shopping. Now we were prepared for the gathering. The following night, which was only days before Christmas, we were at home. I was sitting in the living room, playing with some fuzzy dice. Seeing that I was occupied, my parents stepped away to do stuff. The less said, the better. Anyway, this is where that repressed memory I mentioned some posts back comes into play. My parents came back into the kitchen and were met with a bone-chilling sight. Claw-shaped soot marks were on the fireplace's marble, and I was nowhere to be seen.